I'm Albert, and I want to share a story about my best friend Johnny. Johnny and I were always up for an adventure, and our favorite place was the jungle. We loved climbing, hiking, and exploring new trails. Johnny had a special love for mysteries. He found joy in the things that seemed dangerous to most of us. That thrill, that risk, was what made him feel alive. One winter, we decided to take on a challenging climb deep in the jungle. We found an old, secluded cabin to stay in. The cabin was perfect, hidden away from the world and surrounded by the dense forest. It was exactly the kind of place Johnny loved, full of mystery and potential danger. On the second day of our adventure, we set out to climb a steep cliff. The weather was perfect, and the view was breathtaking. We were halfway up when Johnny spotted a cave entrance. His eyes lit up with excitement. "Albert, we have to check this out," he exclaimed. I knew it was risky, but Johnny's enthusiasm was contagious. We carefully made our way to the cave. Inside, the cave was dark and cold. We used our flashlights to navigate through the narrow passages. Suddenly, the ground beneath us gave way, and we both fell into a deep pit. I managed to grab onto a ledge, but Johnny wasn't so lucky. He fell further down and hit his head. I screamed his name, but there was no response. Panic set in as I climbed down to reach him. When I got to him, I knew it was bad. He was unconscious, and his breathing was shallow. I tried everything to wake him up, but he didn't respond. With great difficulty, I managed to carry him out of the cave and back to the cabin. I radioed for help, but it took hours for the rescue team to arrive. By the time they got there, it was too late. Johnny was gone. The loss of Johnny was devastating. He was more than a friend. He was like a brother to me. After his death, I couldn't bring myself to go on another adventure. The thrill was gone, replaced by the pain of losing someone so dear. Johnny had a little daughter, and every time I see her, I am reminded of him. She has his eyes and his adventurous spirit. When she smiles, I see Johnny, and my heart aches. Tears fill my eyes as memories of our adventures flood back. The jungle, the climbs, the laughter. It all seems like a distant dream now. Johnny's death changed everything. The excitement and thrill of adventure were replaced with sorrow and loss. We all miss him terribly, and his daughter is a constant reminder of the wonderful person he was. Though the adventures have stopped, the memories of our times together live on in my heart. Johnny's spirit will always be with us, and I hope he's found peace in whatever mysterious place he's exploring now. During our first year at university, my friends and I decided to explore a remote, uncharted island. We were all part of the adventure club, and the idea of discovering an untouched paradise was too exciting to pass up. Early one morning, we packed our gear, rented a boat, and set off on our journey. The island was a tiny speck in the vast ocean, surrounded by crystal clear waters and dense vegetation. As we anchored and made our way ashore, the sense of isolation was exhilarating. We found a small, abandoned cabin near the beach and decided it would be our base for the next few days. The first day was spent exploring the island's beaches and shallow reefs. We swam, took pictures, and marveled at the untouched beauty around us. As evening approached, we returned to the cabin, built a fire, and shared stories under the starlit sky. The isolation was complete. There were no other signs of human life. The following day, we decided to venture into the island's dense forest. The thick canopy blocked most of the sunlight, creating an atmosphere of mystery and suspense. As we trekked deeper, we came across an old, overgrown path leading to the island's center. Our curiosity piqued, we followed it, eager to see where it led. After an hour of hiking, we discovered a hidden clearing with a small, serene lake. The water was crystal clear, reflecting the lush greenery around it. It felt like a scene from a dream, untouched and perfect. We spent the day exploring the area, swimming in the lake and soaking in the tranquility. As the sun began to set, we decided to head back to the cabin. However, on our way back, we realized we had lost our way. The forest seemed to have shifted, and the path we had taken was nowhere to be found. Panic set in as we wandered, trying to retrace our steps. The thick forest and the approaching darkness made navigation nearly impossible. Just when we thought we were hopelessly lost, we stumbled upon a different trail. Relieved, we followed it, hoping it would lead us back to the cabin. The trail was narrow and winding, but it felt right. After what seemed like hours, we emerged back onto the beach, not far from our base. Exhausted and shaken, we returned to the cabin and collapsed onto our makeshift beds. The adventure had turned into a suspenseful ordeal, but we were relieved to be safe. That night, as we lay under the stars, we couldn't shake the feeling of the island's mysterious pull. It was beautiful, yet unpredictable, holding secrets we had barely begun to uncover. The next morning, we decided to leave the island. The thrill of exploration had given way to a deep respect for the island's enigmatic nature. As we sailed away, the memories of our adventure stayed with us. The hidden lake, the dense forest, and the sense of being completely cut off from the world. I'm an avid hiker who loves the deep woods, and last winter, I decided to explore the mysterious Greenwoods. Known for its dense trees and remote trails, it was the perfect spot for my adventure. Early one morning, I set off, excited by the crisp air and the eerie quiet of the forest. As I walked, the tall trees closed in around me, creating a canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. Little did I know, this adventure would become one of the most unforgettable experiences of my life. Around midday, the weather changed abruptly. Dark clouds gathered overhead, and a sudden snowstorm hit. The wind howled through the trees, and snow began to fall heavily, turning the ground into a treacherous landscape. I quickly realized I was far from any marked trail, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. Panic began to set in as I struggled to find my way back. The dense forest and the relentless snow made navigation nearly impossible. After hours of wandering in the storm, I stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. It looked like my only chance for shelter. I pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. The cabin was dark and musty, but it offered protection from the relentless storm outside. As I settled in, I noticed an old journal on a dusty table. Curious, I opened it and started reading. The entries detailed the life of a forest ranger named Jack, who had lived in the cabin many years ago. His last entry spoke of strange sightings and eerie sounds in the woods at night. That night, as the storm raged on, I heard faint whispers outside the cabin. My heart pounded as I strained to listen. The voices seemed to be having a conversation, but I couldn't make out the words. I peeked out of the window, but there was no one in sight. The whispers continued, growing louder and more distinct. They sounded like they were right outside the door. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it my imagination? Or was there something supernatural in these woods? The storm finally subsided in the early hours of the morning. The whispers stopped, and an eerie silence fell over the forest. I cautiously opened the cabin door and stepped outside. The forest looked peaceful, as if the storm had never happened. I quickly made my way back, using the rising sun as my guide. When I reached the edge of the forest, I met an old park ranger. I told him about my experience, and he nodded knowingly. Many have reported strange occurrences in Greenwoods, he said. Some say the forest is haunted by spirits of the past. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease as I drove home. The whispers, the storm, and the mysterious journal all replayed in my mind. Yet, despite the fear, there was something comforting about the voices. They didn't seem hostile, just otherworldly. Reflecting on the experience, I realized that nature, in all its beauty and danger, holds mysteries we may never fully understand. My mom, my brother and I lived in a charming town renowned for its beauty. The town was nestled between a dense forest in the front and picturesque mountains in the back, creating breathtaking views, especially in winter when everything was blanketed in snow. Our dad worked far away in the city and only came home on weekends. One crisp winter day, my mom and I left the house to run some errands, following our usual routine. We were walking through the town, enjoying the serene landscape and the cool air, and we heard some shocking news. A local girl had been found in the forest, raped and murdered. The horrific crime had left her lifeless body abandoned among the trees. Fear and anxiety gripped us, and we hurried back home, our hearts pounding with dread. As soon as we got home, my mom called my dad and told him everything, her voice shaking with fear. "We can't stay here anymore. It's not safe," she said. My dad, understanding her fear, immediately agreed that we needed to move. The safety of our family was the priority. Within a few days, my dad found a new house in the city. We packed our belongings and moved, leaving behind the beautiful but now tainted memories of our old town. The move was swift, and soon we were settled into our new life in the city. The urban environment was a stark contrast to the scenic beauty we had left behind. Although we were now safer, the memories of our old town still lingered. The picturesque views, the snowy winters, and the charm of our small community remained etched in our minds. However, the fear and tragedy that had struck that day had changed everything. It was a harsh reminder that even the most beautiful places could hide dark secrets. We never forgot our time in that town, but we were grateful for the safety and peace we found in our new home. A few months ago, I moved into an old house because I loved the charm of old places. I was very happy there for the first week. I enjoyed the large rooms and the antique furniture. It felt like I was living in another time. One day, during the weekend, I decided to explore the whole house. I was very excited about this. As I went from room to room, I admired the old paintings, the creaky wooden floors, and the antique furniture. It was like stepping back in time. Then, I found a hidden door behind a bookshelf. It led to a dark basement. Curious, I went down the stairs. The air grew colder with each step, but I kept going. In the basement, I found an old journal. It belonged to a woman who lived there many years ago. She wrote about hearing whispers at night and feeling like someone was always watching her. As I read the journal, I heard a soft whisper behind me say, "What are you doing here?" I turned around, but no one was there. The lights flickered, and I felt scared. I decided to leave the basement, but when I got to the top of the stairs, the door slammed shut. I was trapped. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, repeating, "You shouldn't be here." I backed away from the door, clutching the journal. I remembered there was a small window in the basement. I hurried over to it, but it was too high for me to reach. I stacked some old crates and boxes to make a ladder. Just as I was about to climb out, I felt a strange chill run down my spine. I quickly climbed up the crates and squeezed through the narrow window. I cut my arms and legs on the way out, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of that house. I ran to my car and drove away. As I looked in the rearview mirror, I thought I saw something moving inside, but I wasn't sure. For weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I did some research and found out that the woman who wrote the journal had disappeared, and no one knew what happened to her. I left a message online and in local papers, warning people about the house. I wrote about the whispers and the hidden basement. I shared the story of the woman who disappeared and the strange things I experienced. I hope my warning would be enough to keep others away. I left the town after that. I knew I did the right thing, but I still have nightmares about that night. I will never forget the fear I felt, but I'm glad at least I tried to warn others. If you ever come across an old house with a hidden basement, be careful. You might hear whispers too. I went to work in a different city for 2 months and booked an Airbnb managed by Mr. Winston. He greeted me warmly, making me feel welcomed and comfortable from the start. The apartment looked cozy and clean, and I settled in happily, looking forward to my stay. The first night passed without any issues. I was exhausted from the journey and slept soundly. The next day was busy with work, exploring the city a bit, and settling into my temporary home. Mr. Winston seemed polite and helpful, offering tips about the area and making sure I had everything I needed. However, on the second night, things took an unexpected turn. I woke up suddenly, feeling a strange sense of unease. It was as if something had stirred me awake. I lay in bed, listening intently. That's when I heard faint whispers coming from the direction of Mr. Winston's room. My curiosity became stronger to know what is happening. I quietly got up to investigate. As I approached Mr. Winston's door, the murmurs grew clearer, but still incomprehensible. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should knock or just walk away. Finally, I decided to gently knock on the door. There was no answer at first, so I knocked again, a bit louder this time. To my surprise, the door creaked open slowly. Peering inside, I saw Mr. Winston standing by a small table adorned with candles and strange symbols drawn on pieces of paper. He seemed deeply engrossed in some sort of ritual, muttering softly under his breath. The sight sent a chill down my spine, and I couldn't move for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. After what felt like an eternity, I quietly backed away from the door and hurried back to my room, locking the door behind me. Thoughts raced through my mind. What was Mr. Winston doing? Was I safe here? The next early morning, I made a decision. I couldn't stay another night in that apartment. I packed my belongings quietly, trying not to attract attention. I left the Airbnb before Mr. Winston woke up, the early morning streets quiet and empty. As I walked away, relief washed over me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered from the night before. It was a relief to leave behind Mr. Winston and his unsettling secrets. But the memory of that night would stay with me for a long time. Since then, whenever I book an Airbnb or stay in a new place, I remember Mr. Winston's face and the eerie scene in his apartment. It serves as a reminder to trust my instincts and be cautious, even in unfamiliar surroundings. I want to share a strange experience I had to warn others. It's not exactly scary, but it really freaked me out at the time. I was on a road trip, driving for over a week. To save money, I slept in my car most nights. When I finally reached a big city near the beach, I decided to book an Airbnb to enjoy on the beach. I found a listing that looked new and modern, in a great location close to the beach and at a good price. The only downside was that it was a new listing with no reviews, but I thought the price was low because it was new and decided to give it a try. When I arrived, the building looked older and more run down than I expected. It seemed like my apartment was the only renovated one in the building, which looked more like a dorm. Still, I let it go because I wasn't paying much and didn't expect a lot. The apartment itself looked just like the pictures, so that was fine. For the first 2 days, everything was great. Being a woman traveling alone, I was careful. I didn't go out after dark and always locked the door using every lock, including the chain. On the third day, I spent the morning out and came back to change before heading to the beach. I locked the door again, including the chain. While I was in the room watching TV and changing, the door suddenly unlocked and someone tried to open it. Luckily, the chain lock was on, so the door didn't fully open. I didn't see who it was because I was coming from the back of the door. I realized this person had a key to the apartment, which scared me a lot. I thought maybe it was the owner, thinking I had checked out early, but my checkout wasn't until the next day. I called the owner and explained what happened. She said only she and I had keys, and she was at work, so it couldn't have been her. Now, I was scared to stay in the apartment, but also didn't want to leave my valuables behind. It was a tough situation. I called my dad, and he said it wasn't okay for someone else to have keys. He spoke with the owner, who promised to come with a locksmith to change the locks and give me new keys. She explained she had owned the apartment for only 6 months, and before my stay, there was only one other Airbnb booking. The apartment had been empty, except for those 2 bookings, because she was renovating it. She suggested that maybe someone connected to the previous owners had a key. I kept thinking, how did it happen that someone tried to come in during the brief 10 minutes I was actually there during the day? What were they trying to do? Maybe they had seen me arrive and wanted to do something bad. These questions still bother me, but I feel very lucky that I used the chain lock on the door. I don't even want to think about what could have happened. I definitely won't leave a good review, and will avoid staying in Airbnbs without reviews or ones that seem too good to be true in the future. I live with my mom, dad and stepsister in a 2-story house. My mom and dad's bedroom is downstairs, and my stepsister and I have our rooms upstairs. Behind our house, there's a garden with a big old tree that we used to love, but one night, everything changed. That evening, everything was normal. We had dinner together, talked about our day, and then went to our rooms to sleep. It was a quiet night. Around midnight, a loud scream broke the silence. It was my stepsister, and she sounded terrified. I jumped out of bed and ran to her room. My parents, who were sleeping downstairs, came running too. My stepsister was standing in the hallway, shaking and crying. She kept saying, "There's someone in my room." We cautiously went into her room, but it seemed empty. The room was in its usual state, nothing out of place. But the fear in my stepsister's eyes told us something had really scared her. As we tried to calm her down, my dad walked over to the window that faced the garden. He suddenly stopped, and his face turned pale. He pointed towards the garden and whispered, "Someone's out there." We all rushed to the window and saw a shadowy figure running away, disappearing into the darkness. The sight of that figure made my stepsister cry even harder. It turned out that my stepsister had forgotten to close her window and turn off her room light before going to bed. The man had climbed up the big tree in the garden, used its branches to reach her window, and had gotten inside while she was sleeping. This realization made me feel even more scared and vulnerable. We called the police, and they arrived quickly. They searched the garden and the surrounding area, but couldn't find any trace of the intruder. They told us to be more careful, make sure all windows and doors were locked. The police left, but the fear remained. We all stayed in the living room that night, too scared to go back to our rooms. The next day, we tried to go back to our normal routine, but things felt different. The big tree in the garden, which we had always loved, now seemed like a threat. We couldn't look at it the same way anymore. We also made sure to keep all the windows and doors locked at all times. My stepsister was especially affected by the incident. She couldn't sleep alone in her room for weeks. My mom and dad took turns sleeping with her until she felt safe again. We also installed new locks on all the windows and doors, and even put bars on some of the windows for extra security. The big tree in the garden, which had once been a source of joy and comfort, now stood as a reminder of that terrifying night. We talked about cutting it down, but we couldn't bring ourselves to do it. It was like getting rid of it, would mean accepting that our home was no longer safe. Months passed, and slowly, things started to get back to normal. My stepsister was able to sleep alone in her room again, though she always made sure to close and lock the window and turn off the light before going to bed. We all became more vigilant, making sure our home was secure before going to sleep each night. It was a warm summer afternoon when I decided to go for a hike in the hills near my town. I had heard about a hidden trail that was said to have beautiful views, but not many people knew about it. I thought it would be an adventure to find it and explore the less traveled path. I packed a small bag with some water, snacks, and my phone, and set off around noon. The main trail was busy with other hikers, but after a while, I found the hidden path that veered off to the right. It was narrow and overgrown, but I felt a rush of excitement as I stepped onto it. The trail was peaceful and quiet, surrounded by tall trees that cast dappled shadows on the ground. I walked for about an hour, enjoying the sounds of nature and the feeling of solitude. But as the sun started to dip lower in the sky, I realized I hadn't seen any signs or markers for a while. The path seemed to be getting less distinct, and I began to worry that I might be lost. I took out my phone to check the time and realized there was no signal. I tried to retrace my steps, but the woods looked different in the fading light. Panic started to set in as I walked faster, hoping to find a familiar landmark. I shouted for help a few times, but my voice was swallowed by the dense forest. Just when I was about to give up hope, I saw a faint light flickering through the trees. Relieved, I hurried towards it, thinking it might be another hiker or a campsite. As I got closer, I saw an old cabin, barely visible through the thick foliage. The light was coming from a lantern hanging on the porch. I approached cautiously, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" There was no response. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear a faint rustling sound from inside. I pushed the door open and stepped in, hoping to find someone who could help me. The cabin was small and dusty, filled with old furniture and cobwebs. It looked like no one had lived there for years. But on the table, I saw a map and a compass. My heart raced as I realized these could help me find my way back. I grabbed them and turned to leave, but something made me stop. I felt a strange sensation, like I was being watched. I looked around, but saw no one. The feeling was so intense that it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I hurried out of the cabin and back into the woods, clutching the map and compass. Using the compass and what little daylight was left, I managed to find my way back to the main trail. The relief I felt when I saw other hikers was overwhelming. I made it back home just as night fell, exhausted but safe. I never found out who left the lantern on in that cabin, or how the map and compass ended up there. It remains a mystery, but one thing is for sure. I'll never forget my adventure in those woods, and the strange cabin that helped me find my way back. Last winter, my friend Jake and I decided to rent a cabin in the woods for a weekend getaway. We needed a break from our busy lives, and a few days in the snow-covered wilderness seemed like the perfect escape. We found a cozy cabin online, nestled deep in the forest, far from any towns or other cabins. We arrived on a Friday afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to set. The cabin was beautiful, with a stone fireplace, large windows, and a porch that overlooked a frozen lake. We unpacked our bags, made some hot chocolate, and settled in for a relaxing evening. As night fell, a heavy snowstorm began. The wind howled outside and the snow piled up quickly, but we were warm and safe inside. We played board games and talked about our plans for the weekend. Around midnight, we decided to call it a night and went to our separate rooms. In the middle of the night, I woke up to a strange noise. It was a faint, rhythmic tapping sound, almost like someone knocking on wood. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but the sound was too regular. I got up, grabbed a flashlight, and went to investigate. I followed the sound to the living room, where I found Jake already there, looking puzzled. "Do you hear that?" I asked. He nodded, and we both listened intently. The tapping seemed to be coming from the front door. We slowly approached the door, our hearts pounding. Jake grabbed a fireplace poker, just in case. When we opened the door, we were greeted by a blast of cold air and swirling snow. But there was no one there. The tapping had stopped. Confused, we closed the door and went back inside. We double-checked all the windows and doors to make sure they were locked, then went back to bed, thinking it must have been a branch or something blown by the wind. The next morning, we woke up to a bright, sunny day. The snowstorm had passed, leaving a thick blanket of snow covering everything. We decided to explore the area around the cabin and enjoy the beautiful scenery. As we walked towards the lake, we noticed something strange. There were footprints in the snow, leading from the edge of the forest to our cabin. The footprints were large and spaced far apart, as if made by someone running. They stopped abruptly at our front door, then turned and went back into the forest. We looked at each other, a chill running down our spines. Someone had been outside our cabin during the night. Determined to find out what had happened, we followed the footprints into the forest. They led us to a clearing where we found an old, abandoned cabin. It looked like it had been empty for years, with broken windows and a collapsed roof. We cautiously approached and peeked inside. To our surprise, we found a small table in the center of the cabin with a note on it. The note was old and faded, but we could still make out the words, "If you find this, beware. Do not stay in the woods after dark. Return to the main road before sunset." We felt a sense of unease as we read the note. Who had written it, and why? We decided to heed the warning and return to our cabin. As soon as we got back, we packed our bags and left, making our way back to the main road as quickly as possible. The rest of our trip was uneventful, but the memory of that strange night and the abandoned cabin stayed with us. We never found out who left the footprints or why the note was there, but we learned one thing. Sometimes, it's best to listen to warnings and not take unnecessary risks. In the heart of a bustling city, amidst towering skyscrapers and noisy streets, there lay a forgotten alley. It was narrow, shadowed by ancient buildings with cracked windows and graffiti-stained walls. Few dared to venture there, except for Max, a curious teenager with a knack for exploration. Max had always been drawn to mysteries. Despite warnings from his friends about the alley's eerie reputation, he couldn't resist its allure. On this particular rainy afternoon, as droplets pattered against the cobblestones, Max found himself at the mouth of the forgotten alley once again. The air was thick with a musty scent of history as Max navigated the dimly lit passage. A chill ran down his spine, amplified by the ominous silence that enveloped him. Graffiti adorned the walls like cryptic messages from another world, adding to the alley's mystique. As he ventured deeper, Max noticed a faint glow emanating from the end of the alley. Intrigued, he quickened his pace until he stood before an old bookstore. Its sign, weather-worn and barely visible, read, "Arcane Books." The windows were obscured by dust and age, yet a warm light flickered from within. Pushing open the creaky door, Max entered a realm frozen in time. Shelves upon shelves of ancient tomes lined the walls, their leather-bound spines bearing faded titles in languages he couldn't decipher. The air inside was heavy with the scent of yellowed pages and forgotten knowledge. His heart racing with excitement, Max explored further, guided by an inexplicable pull towards the corner of the bookstore. There, nestled among books on folklore and forgotten legends, he found a peculiar wooden chest. It was ornately carved with intricate patterns of dragons and serpents, its lock rusted with age. Eager fingers traced the contours of the chest, until they found a hidden latch. With a soft click, the lid swung open, revealing a treasure trove of artifacts. A tarnished key, a map marked with cryptic symbols, and a faded journal with entries in a language that seemed ancient yet strangely familiar. As Max leafed through the journal, his eyes widened with each revelation. It spoke of lost civilizations, hidden keys to realms beyond, and warnings of guardians who protected secrets buried deep within the city. He realized he had stumbled upon something far greater than he could have imagined. A quest that would unravel mysteries centuries in the making. Suddenly, a distant sound broke the silence, the echo of footsteps approaching. Max snapped the journal shut, hastily stashing it into his backpack along with the artifacts. With a final glance at the bookstore, he slipped out into the alley, just as a hooded figure turned the corner. Heart pounding, Max raced through the labyrinthine streets, his mind ablaze with questions and possibilities. Who had left the chest? What secrets did the artifacts hold? And who was the mysterious figure trailing him? As he reached the safety of his apartment, Max vowed to uncover the truth behind the hidden key. Little did he know, his discovery was just the beginning of an adventure that would test his courage, wit, and resolve like never before. A few years ago, my friend Alex and I decided to go on a road trip to a remote area in the mountains. We had heard about a small cabin available for rent that was off the beaten path, perfect for a quiet getaway. The owner, an old man named Mr. Harlan, gave us the key and a peculiar warning. If you find anything strange, don't mess with it. The drive up was beautiful, with winding roads and scenic views. We finally arrived at the cabin, which looked quaint and well kept. We unloaded our bags and made ourselves at home. As we explored, we noticed that the cabin was full of old books, maps, and a large wooden desk with drawers. After settling in, we decided to take a walk around the property. Behind the cabin, we found a small, locked shed. It seemed odd, but we figured it was just for storage. We didn't think much of it and headed back inside as the evening approached. Later that night, as we sat by the fireplace, Alex mentioned the books he had found in the living room. They were filled with strange symbols and diagrams, like something out of a conspiracy theory. Curious, we started flipping through them, trying to make sense of the mysterious markings. That's when we noticed something strange. One of the books had a folded piece of paper tucked inside. It was a hand-drawn map of the area, with a series of numbers written along the edges. We recognized the location as the cabin's surroundings, but the numbers puzzled us. Intrigued, we decided to figure out what the numbers meant. After some discussion, we realized they resembled coordinates. We grabbed our flashlights and, armed with the map, ventured out into the cold night, following the directions indicated. The coordinates led us to the locked shed behind the cabin. To our surprise, the numbers matched the combination lock on the door. We hesitated, remembering Mr. Harlan's warning, but curiosity got the better of us. We entered the combination, and the lock clicked open. Inside, we found an old, dusty room filled with more books, documents, and an old radio. On a table, there was a large map with red pins marking various locations. As we looked closer, we noticed the pins corresponded to the numbers in the book. It was like a treasure map, but what treasure? Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, and a distorted voice came through. It was faint, but we could make out words like transmission, coordinates, and discovery. We were both intrigued and uneasy. The voice seemed to be giving instructions, but to whom? We quickly left the shed, locked it behind us, and returned to the cabin, where we spent the rest of the night discussing what we had found. In the morning, we decided to leave early, feeling uneasy about the whole situation. As we packed up, we noticed something strange. Our car's fuel gauge was almost empty, despite having filled it up before arriving. We drove to the nearest gas station, and as we filled the tank, we noticed a newspaper stand. The headline caught our attention: "Local man found after mysterious disappearance." The article was about Mr. Harlan, who had been missing for several days. The date of the newspaper was the day we had arrived at the cabin. Chills ran down our spines. Who had given us the key to the cabin? What were the numbers and the radio transmissions all about? We never found out, but we both agreed to never speak of that weekend again. To this day, we wonder if we stumbled upon something much bigger and more secretive than we could ever understand.